iqiniso neskelem imbokodo zomthandazi ikhokhokazi odok bephinifa abavuka abawashe bapheke baklinde bageza abantwana before bemsebenzini ode to the fat black Nubian queens of Africa's ghettos ingulube zomjondolo eziphila ama-shift nakamadala ejudeni gunmen akunakeve egqoka ikhavela ihleva zigqoka iphinifa netshali zithwela abazukulu emqolo zine-stress secross aziphatha amaklami ihleva aziphatha amadamu namawipa namanepkini.
It is something Soweto coming through with Mama Womtandazo. That is how we kick off the show this afternoon. He's had quite a bit of activity on social media over the last 2-3 weeks or so. He's featured in a brand new song. And there seems to be a conversation around the eligibility of shared rights, and as far as the song is concerned, and ultimately led to his vocals being stripped from the track. But that's a conversation for another day. It is The Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, on SAFM.
This September, S3 brings you thought-provoking nature dockies that will change the way in which you view the world. Search for the Last Unicorn tells the story of the search for the northern white rhino, an animal that was officially declared extinct in 2018. Follow Saving the Survivors as they travel to South Sudan in the hope of giving us a second chance to save the northern white rhino. Airs Sunday the 22nd of September. Channel your inner activist with our selection of premium dockies Sundays at 5 p.m. only on S3. Open up. S3.
Ashopol is over 110 years old and was born out of the desire to serve South Africans who work hard to build this country from the ground up. With over 5 million lives covered and named Best Life Insurer by Forbes, Ashopol is here for you today and will be there for your family tomorrow. SMS serve to 44366 and we'll call you back. Ashopol is an insurer licensed to conduct life insurance business, an authorized financial services provider. FSP 53. T's and C's apply.
Ziwa non-stop in the Betway Premiership. Abafana Westende have a huge task to secure 3 points, while Batabani Bantwa are ready to fight with all they have to grab an important win. This is Ibolana Semzansi. Catch the nail-biting contest between Golden Arrows and Marumo Gallants this Saturday, 21 September at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Bridget Masinga, weekdays on The Full Circle.
I hope you are having a good afternoon, by the way. I think we've been waiting with much anticipation, at the very least within the Joburg region, for this rain that we've been preempted about, but it seems that it is delayed somewhere, or maybe I speak too soon. I don't know. I know that in Durban it's been very cloudy, especially the visuals coming out this morning as the build-up to, of course, the burial for former Minister Pravin Gordhan, and seeing those visuals early on in the morning as his family prepared to depart their family home in Reservoir Hills, and Durban was delivering on the cold, wet, gloomy weather. But yeah, it seems to be holding steady in Johannesburg. And speaking of the build-up to the burial of the former minister, and of course, apartheid activist stalwart that's happening this afternoon, we obviously have all been following the very many tributes that have been coming through via the various 24-hour news channels. And it was quite delightful, I think, this morning to hear Minister in the Presidency's Khumbuzo Mchaweni talking around their relationship, their personal and professional relationship, and some of the anecdotes that she was sharing around, what seemed to be very much a mentor-mentee interchange between them. And she was recounting that oftentimes when they discourse and debate on issues, if she or other comrades had presented issues for discussion, he would often, tell them to go back to the drawing room and think on matters a little bit deeper, and present a case that was a little bit more grounded and meaty with substance, and then would take it one step further and actually send them the relevant materials to argue for his position, the relevant videos or further reading or further data that substantiated his position on the matter. But she shared it in a way that I think if you've ever had a mentor-mentee relationship, you could, just see the appreciation for the relationship for what it was. You could see the love that was shared between the two of them, and even in moments where he quite literally held her hand to the fire. She really seemed to appreciate what they've had over the last couple of years. So it's often nice as well, I think, to see our politicians as human beings, because we get caught up in relating with them very much from a one-dimensional perspective. And so to hear other people share their reflections and their memories of them as human beings, it just brings a more rounded picture of the individual. Anyway, we're waiting for the president to deliver the eulogy for this afternoon's proceedings, and we'll let you know when that commences. From our side, though, we're talking around big food and how they are stalking our children. And this makes reference to some of the more aggressive food marketing strategies that are targeting children and contributing to South Africa's rising obesity rate amongst the younger population. We'll also be touching base with the folks from outside the bowl, Africa, and they launched the Million Meals in 5 Days campaign to tackle child hunger. And this is off the back of it being rather successful last year. And so we'll catch up with them around what's to be expected this year. Stages, pages, screens, and more is also coming up. On the other side of 2 o'clock, we're going to delve into some legal matters, and we'll let you know what is on the agenda there closer to the time. Let's take a quick pause and then we come back and we catch up with Laurie Lake.
Mzansi, what has become of our country? Gender-based violence is eating our moral fabric, and we can no longer afford to turn a blind eye. This violence affects us all, occurring in various forms including femicide, which is the intentional killing of a woman because of her gender. It takes place anywhere, anytime, even in our own safe spaces at home. Working together with social partners through the National Strategic Plan on GBVF, the government aims to create a GBVF-free South Africa. As we acknowledge the gains from our 30 years of freedom and democracy, let us also work together to break the cycle of GBVF on our home ground. Call the 24-hour GBVF Command Center number on 0800 428 428 or text *120*7867#. A message from the GCIS.
20 outfits of the Premier League are back on the battlefield for another spectacular season, with ambitions to play the world's most competitive and compelling football.
Rodri! City 3! West Ham 1!
This is the massive fight for the ultimate glory.
Caicedo, is he going to try and beat him from inside his own arm? Oh, boys, it's Caicedo! I can't believe it! What a way to score your first Chelsea goal!
Experience the 2024-2025 Premier League season on Saturdays at 3:30 p.m. Live on SABC3 and at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Also available on SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Bridget Masinga, weekdays on The Full Circle.
All right, let's get into this conversation with Laurie Lake, who's a child health advocate, as well as a communication and education specialist. And she's with the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town. And we're kicking off the show today by obviously looking at this issue around how big food is stalking our children. This is a question that was posed. And it explores really the aggressive food marketing strategies that are targeting children in South Africa and contributing to obesity. How are you doing this afternoon, Laurie? You good?
Yeah, good to be here. The sun is shining in Cape Town, so.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the time. Let's get straight into it. When we talk around, big food stalking children, a lot of people say, well, what do we mean? What is the crux of this conversation?
So I'd like to take us a step back
Yeah.
and just get a handle on what is happening in terms of the nutritional status of South Africa's children. So just over a month ago, the Children's Institute released the South African Child Gauge Report that tracks progress for children year on year. And one of the key findings is that we're seeing incredibly high levels of stunting, which is a form of undernutrition. And at the same time, we've seen a dramatic rise in overweight and obesity in children under 5. So if we look back to the South African Demographic Health Survey of 2016, back then we were looking at 1 in 8 young children who were either overweight or obese. And the most recent data that's come out from the HSRC's National Food and Nutrition Security Survey is that we're now looking at 1 in 4 young children who are overweight and obese. That's almost doubled in less than 10 years. And these figures are more than 4 times the global average. So we are looking at a crisis or an epidemic of overweight and obesity in very young children. And that matters because we know that overweight and obesity then increases as children get older. And especially for adolescent girls and women. And in turn, that increases their risk of developing what we call non-communicable diseases. Diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, that are really threatening to overwhelm our healthcare service. And that's as things stand at the moment. And if we're looking at this really high proportion of very young children who are now overweight and obese, we can just imagine what the trajectory of that is going to be over time.
And I mean, it's alarming, you know, the stats and the figures that you share. 1 out of 4 overweight and obese under the age of 5. Because let's talk around what that speaks to. I guess it's a multitude of factors that come into play when we're talking children's nutrition, healthy nutrition.
Yeah, so in many ways there are a very large number of families in South Africa who are stuck between a rock and a hard place. We know that since COVID-19, poverty rates, child poverty rates have increased dramatically, in particular food poverty. We're looking, for example, at 7 in 10 young children who are living below the upper bound poverty line. And that means that they're living in households whose families can't really meet their basic needs for food and clothing and shelter and school uniforms and electricity. So we're seeing families under strain with very limited money to spend on food. That influences their choices, their ability to provide their children with a diverse diet with all the vitamins and minerals and proteins that they need for optimal growth. But at the same time, we've seen the dramatic expansion of global food corporations into the global south. And I think no matter how far you might travel, so even deep into a rural area, you will find a shop that is selling Coca-Cola, that is selling those bright orange wind chips that are so full of air and tartrazine and salts and yet are empty of any nutrients. So we're looking at what we call many children growing up in food deserts, in communities where there's very limited access to healthy food choices, and a very large proportion of South Africa's children growing up in what we call food swamps, where what's available at the local ShopRite or Spaza shop is simply unhealthy. It's high in energy and full of salt and sugar and fat, and very, very low in nutrients. And that's the other thing that's really driving this epidemic of overweight and obesity.
And I think that segues us into the next point of discussion, because obviously when we look at sort of this infiltration by, these global brands and conglomerates, they also come in with very aggressive marketing strategies. And this is a conversation that's been explored now in relation to child obesity and good nutritional health for children. How do we begin to address this very much aggressive and very targeted marketing?
So maybe it's useful to talk a little bit about what we mean by child-centered marketing practices. We know that the food industry is spending vast amounts of money globally in targeting children as consumers. And that's because children have taste power within the family.
Yeah.
Anyone who stood in one of those queues at ShopRite or Pick and Pay and have had to sort of try and have a conversation with their child around why they can't have the chocolate or the chips that are there on display. That at point of sale marketing is a strategy that is designed to tap into a captive audience. You're stuck at that tool for a long period of time. And it's very difficult to resist that pester power. At the same time, we have, for example, breakfast cereals with, that are colored blue or bright pink.
Yeah.
That's not about the taste of the food. That's designed to attract children. The use of cartoon characters in the advertising, again, is designed to appeal to children as consumers. And that's because industry knows that they not only have pester power now within their families, but that if we, in a sense, get them hooked on a particular product or a particular taste, that sets their tastes and their food preferences for life. So it's a really powerful investment in building brand loyalty across the life course.
Yeah. There's been conversation, Laurie, as we wind it down, but there's been conversation around proposals, right, for stricter regulations around this. How far have we advanced this conversation?
So there's been very clear guidance issued by the World Health Organization from as far back as 2010 around the need to put in place restrictions to prevent the marketing of these unhealthy foods to children. We have at the moment a voluntary code where industry polices itself in South Africa, and that's really not working. We're seeing children exposed to adverts for these kinds of products during prime family viewing on TV. We're seeing adverts and billboards at schools, in places where children gather. We're seeing adverts that tap into children's fantasies and longings, falling in love, going to the matric dance, winning a soccer match. All these things that we long for are now associated with a particular brand. So it's not even that the brand is selling what's in the food.
Yeah.
They're tapping into this fantasy life of children in ways that is incredibly difficult to resist. And so we're very excited to see the Department of Health issuing Regulation R3337 that will introduce front-of-pack warning labels. And that means that as a consumer, you're going to be able to go into the shop and you're going to be able to see at a glance, is this product good or bad for my health?
Yeah.
Does it have too much salt or too much sugar, too much saturated fat or too many artificial sweeteners? And that means that we can make informed choices as consumers, whether we're children or parents who care about children. And in addition, those products that carry a front-of-pack warning label may not be marketed to children.
Wonderful. Laurie Lake, we have to leave it there for this afternoon. And Laurie is, of course, a advocate and an education specialist in the field of child health advocacy. And she's with the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town. It's just gone 1:30. It's time for us to get into the headline news.
And in the headlines, former SACP General Secretary Dr. Blade Nzimande has called on the tripartite alliance of the ANC, SACP and COSATU to rally and face its current challenges. He was speaking at the special official funeral of former Minister Pravin Gordhan in Durban. The Tshwane Metro Mayor, Celia Brink, has reaffirmed his commitment to the capital city. He held a media briefing today following the withdrawal of its key partner, Action SA, from the coalition. And a Japanese learner who had been studying in China has died after being stabbed. His murder is likely to further strain bilateral relations between the two countries. Details at 2 o'clock.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
Haven't heard Utsile's voice in quite a while. It's good to have you back. Right now, though, we're getting into a conversation with Outside the Bowl CEO Mark Maingard, and we're looking at the launch of a 1 million meals in 5 days campaign that's aimed to tackle child hunger. And this comes off what was a very successful, although ambitious, run of the campaign last year. How are you doing this afternoon, Mark? You good?
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's only a pleasure. Let's quickly just rewind back to the motivation, because this is not the first run of the 1 million meals in 5 days. So let's rewind back to the motivation for you guys initiating this campaign, initially, and the successes that came off the back of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We started actually 3 years ago, and we said, look, we want to do something every year that will create awareness, and that people just sort of notice us, and in a good way, I say that humbly. And we did that world record poetry course competition. And then last year we said, well, what else can we do? And we came up with the idea of the 1 million meals. And it's a massive task to do those many meals in 5 days, but it puts us under pressure, it puts our team under pressure. So, we also have to feel that it's tough out there to survive in our country, and what people or kids might feel in these communities. So yeah, it was very successful, and we ended up doing 1.4 million meals last year, which was really amazing.
Wow.
And we touched hundreds of thousands of children because of that event, and our corporate partners and everybody involved were just absolutely amazing. And so we decided this year, due to the success of last year, we're gonna continue with it. We've added one thing, and that we've got a big a raffle for a car attached to it this year, where people can enter online and contribute 150 rand and stand a chance of winning a vehicle, and also that gives them 20 portions of our nutritious food. So we're hoping, again, I say, without being arrogant, we're hoping maybe we can push towards the 2 million mark this year, depending on the support we get.
Yeah. And as we have this conversation, obviously just having left the line with Laurie talking around some concerns around children's nutrition in South Africa. And one of the things that she mentioned was of this year's SA Child Gauge report saw a high level of stunting amongst South African children, and of course a rise in obesity as well, with South African children below the age of 5. Let's talk about how initiatives like 1 million meals in 5 days talks to addressing exactly that.
Yeah, it's so sad. We are exposed to these children. That's what we focus on, is those young kids in early childhood development centres, and we realise the need for brain food. It's sad when you see there's so much stunting happen. In actual fact, after scientific work and stuff done, they've actually taken it down a level, and it's now referred to as wasting. That's almost, when a child gets to that level, there is just no, you can't fix it. And we as a country, and people of this country, we cannot continue allowing this. And the only way to fix the problem is to ensure that these kids get brain food, not just any food. We need to give them stuff that we can give them the brain capacity to be able to fish themselves one day. At the moment, we've got to give them fish until they are okay to fish for their own fish. So the situation is dire. I mean, last year we sent food into the Eastern Cape with Gifts of the Givers, where 9 children had died from malnutrition. It just breaks my heart, and we got to stand up. I mean, and we got to take hands. We got to collaborate and work together. And even in this non-profit space, you can't believe there's like competition. It's so unnecessary. We're all working towards the same goal, and it's time that we create this massive collaboration with each other and start taking hands and making a difference together.
For anyone listening to our conversation, and we'll also get into Vita Kids and Maxi Blend meals. Let's talk about what is contained within the packs, or how rather the campaign looks. The 1 million meals in 5 days campaign. Are you sending off food care packs to homes and children in your database? How does it work?
Okay, so we're focusing on the kids. So it's all about the kids. This whole event's about the kids. And then we take food after the event, which is the final day, the 6th of December. We then physically issue, we do it in our 20-litre buckets, so they get the buckets to use afterwards. And we physically issue this out to ECDs in communities over South Africa. So some corporates that get involved will say to us, listen, we want you to support these particular ECDs. Other corporates give us the funds and say, you continue feeding where you do. So we have a footprint, quite a strong footprint in the Western Cape. We do quite a bit in the Eastern Cape, Natal, and up in Gauteng. So it's not just Western Cape based.
Let's talk about the nutritional benefits of Vita Kids and Maxi Blend meals, because these were chosen for the 2024 campaign.
Yes. So, I mean, the whole thing about our meals is it's not just food, as I said, it's nutritional food, and it's our instant energy Vita Kids product is instant, so you can add water and have it as a drink or as a porridge or puff as we know it. So that's like really your kids coming in the morning, and that's their morning thing. It gives them all the vitamins, 85%, up to 85% of their daily nutritional requirement in that one meal. And it also contains immune-boosting vitamins and lots of other things, which is very good for them. But most importantly, gives them brain food. And the same with our amazing meals product. It's a soya-based product with lentils and split peas and rice and spices and nutritional stuff in it, which is a product that needs to be cooked. It's not instant, but also it's full of nutrition, and it's something one can use more for like a lunch meal.
Yeah. Talk to me about, oftentimes we also like to concern ourselves with the sustainability of campaigns. We obviously understand that campaigns are great for maximizing on awareness, and, there are organizations that will run a campaign in a short sort of span of time just for the punch of awareness, or that need to sort of maximize on the attention and get as much involvement as possible. But let's talk about the sustainability of this as well, and the ability to maybe just prolong the interventions with your respective ECD schools that you've partnered with to make sure that the kids are getting those buckets on a regular basis.
Well, our database of ECDs that we've been supporting and working with for 6-7 years now, we continually support them. This is just a big drive towards the end of the year to make some more impact. But you're absolutely right. It's not a thing of it's a once-off thing and then we forget about them, because then we're not achieving anything. So we take hands, and we've built up incredible relationships with a lot of amazing organizations that we work with. So it's not just the stuff just gets done somewhere. It's done properly. Yeah.
All right. Interventions. How do people plug in? How do organizations? And you mentioned that some organizations have come in and, they've partnered with you with the respective schools that they've identified that they want to assist. Some people write checks. I always say all kinds of help is great as long as it's speaking to what your needs are as an organization and what you need to accomplish on the ground. But for those listening that might want to plug in, what do they need to know?
Well, I think what I would firstly say is, go onto our website, www.outsidethebowl.org. Lauren Erasmus is our executive director. If people have any questions after reading and going through the website and looking at the whole the stuff on the campaign, they're welcome to contact us. But the big thing is, we need support. No organisation. We've got our own for-profit company too that plows money into our non-profit. So we also try and fund a lot of ourselves. But we can't do it without the support of our amazing nation and corporates. And I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention, but we've got some top-tier corporates like PepsiCo and Petco and other large corporates that have been supporting us for many years. So we've built up a reputation, and they know what we're about. So they know our hearts, and they know we want to make a difference. So all I ask today is, please, the public can get involved for 150 Rand. We get 20 portions of our products and also stand a chance to win a little Suzuki Swift car. So that would be amazing.
Wonderful stuff. Mark Maingard, thank you so much for the time. And Mark is the CEO of Outside the Bowl, a great initiative that they've got going on here. 1 million meals in 5 days. And last year they raised 1.5 million meals in 5 days. And this year hoping to double those efforts as well. So if you can get them to the finish line, that would be awesome. It's just gone 20 to 2 o'clock.
Africa from Within follows the journey of our anchor presenters who travel to various locations in order to delve into the inner workings and untold stories of the unsung heroes. At its core, Africa from Within is all about grassroots storytelling and the showcasing of the conservation contributions of ordinary people to Africa. It aims to engage and entertain viewers, educate and promote conservation, and inspire viewers to value our natural heritage. Don't miss Africa from Within on SABC2 every Friday at 7 p.m.
There's no road our Buckies haven't traveled on. Roads to new beginnings. Roads to many firsts.
Enjoy your day at school.
Roads to delivering precious cargo.
Breathe, honey. We're almost there.
Even roads to saving the day.
Hey, we're going to have to tow you.
With every road that we've traveled for 45 years, we are what a Bucky should be. Bold, capable, and reliable. Introducing the new limited edition D-Max 45, equipped with everything you need for every kind of adventure. Isuzu, with you for the long run.
Unlock a world of benefits. Welcome to SABC's TV License Rewards program. Ready to make your viewing experience more rewarding? Say hello to perks that go beyond just watching TV. Join us today at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and instantly receive your first reward. But wait, there's more. You can get up to 500 Rand back. Become part of something bigger, a movement where watching TV isn't just a hobby. It's a catalyst for positive change. Register now at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and open the door to a world of benefits. Plus, every time you tune in, you're making a difference. T's and C's apply. Remember, TV license fees aren't just payments. They make a difference. The Battle of Students will produce real drama, passion, and emotions in the Varsity Derby. UJ have a big assignment to emphasize why they deserve maximum points. But Ama Tugs are growing in confidence that victory can add a good boost to climb higher. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. UJ Ladies FC versus University of Pretoria Ladies FC on Saturday 21 September at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
All right, as the show continues to unfold, we're going to get into a conversation now around Jiga Izinto, Voice of South Africa's Youth, that's co-created with South African Youth for Stages, Pages, Screens and More.
Stages, pages, screens and more on The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
Catching up with Girl Effect for Jiga Izinto, Lebu Leach joins us now. She's the creative lead for this campaign, and she's going to tell us more about it. How are you doing, Lebu?
I'm so good, thank you. How are you, Bridget?
I'm great. Cannot complain. All right. I guess let's first get some context as to Jiga Izinto, the campaign, and how that came about.
So Digizinto as a brand was birthed through us doing some kind of landscape research and trying to understand what's going on with South African youth at the moment. Our employment rates are through the roof, over 10 million and counting. The HIV statistics are also on the rise, as well as general STI. And mental well-being is also on, mental health challenges are also on the rise. And we're wondering, what is causing this? What is happening? And it turns out that this generation is feeling a little bit despondent, feeling disconnected, feeling a little bit hopeless. And in response to that, we were like, okay, cool, let's build a brand that inspires hope in this generation. Because resources are abundant. Young people are just not taking them up. So how do we find a way to say to them, hey, your life is in your hands. You can do it. This is the generation that had to survive COVID during their coming of age. This is the generation that was here when we were seeing kind of tornadoes in KZN for the first time. So and we wanted to bring something into the zeitgeist, bring something into South Africa that would help just reframe where your life could go as a young person, to turn things around.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you bring up, Lebu, also in one hand highlights the need, I guess, to empower South African youth to some degree, right? Because when you say, for instance, that resources are abundant, but perhaps the know-how and the where to is where the misalignment comes in. And how does the campaign then speak to that through what it does? Or maybe before we even get there, getting an understanding of what the campaign looks like in practice.
So the campaign is designed to create a conversation with young people, as well as equip them with the tools they need to take their next step. And these tools show up in a myriad of ways. We found that with things around mental well-being, and also just kind of getting started on your journey, you need mentoring, you need modeling, you need to see it exist somewhere. When we spoke to young people across the country, they were like, yeah, I see that the MIDA has something, but it just doesn't feel like it's for me. Oh, I saw that person doing something, but I feel like I wouldn't be good enough, right? So we're all about taking that language, making it in youthonese, if that could be a term, young people speak, to make it feel like it's for them. Practically, what that means is we have built a low data Mobi site. We call it a web app, or it is a web app, so it's got the functionality of an app without having to have the commitment of downloading it onto your phone.
Yeah.
You jump on there, you jump into our service directory, whatever service you need, type it in there, and you can find it. And this is in response to young people saying, I Google all types of things. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's a scam. I don't know what's real. So our promise to young people is these are vetted partners. These are vetted services that you can go to, and you will get the help that you need. Another thing is they just felt not seen and not connected. So we will run, or we are currently running, all sorts of campaigns. We have a song dropping that is going to be an anthem to inspire them. You know, like when you wake up in the morning, you put your playlist on. Digizinto is going to be on that playlist to say, you got it. This is the day. This is the day you're going to turn things around. We have a TV series coming out where we can model what a journey could look like through difficult times, but you can make it through by accessing these tools. We also have a bevy of partners that we're working with to connect young people to tangible services to move things forward. The reason we've been intentional about partnering with people is we don't want to come in and reinvent the wheel. South Africa, unlike other spaces, actually has a lot of resources. It's just that connection bit. Getting them to walk through the door of a clinic, getting them to walk through the door of a development agency, getting them to walk through the door and speak to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, if that's what they need. Even just going to a community center to connect with friends.
Yeah. For any young folk listening, as we wrap up the conversation, for any young folk listening that perhaps want to explore the campaign or maybe see the kind of conversation that you are sparking with some of the community, is there a digital platform that we can go and use as a resource?
100%. So our website is jiggy.co.za. But given we're taking steer from young people and they're like, yeah, we're on social media. We don't really want to be looking for you everywhere. So the best place to connect with us is on our social channels, jiggizinto_ZA.
Awesome stuff. Lebulich, thank you so much for the time today. She's the creative lead of Jigizinto. And as you heard, they are wherever you are. If you are a young person on social media, you can definitely find them. It's just gone 10 to 2 o'clock. Let's take a quick pause and then we come back and we jump into the next conversation.
Weeknights on S3 are anything but ordinary. BBC Primetime brings you the best of British television from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Open your mind to Life on Death Row, Thursdays at 9 p.m. and Resistance in a Hostile Environment, a 3-part documentary showcasing turning points which would go on to define race relations in the UK for a generation. Thursdays at 10 p.m. Wind down your weeknights with The Outlaws, Fridays at 9 p.m. and explore the world's most dangerous roads at 10 p.m. Channel your best entertainment with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
Grass will suffer when Golden Lions collide with Natal Sharks. They both target the gold medal. Gauteng tackles KZN. This is the Currie Cup final. Catch the incredible battle of Mzansi's great rugby teams, Golden Lions versus Natal Sharks, the Saturday 21 September at 3:30 p.m. live on SABC2. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
How can we make healthcare work for everyone? Join the discussion at the 2024 GEM Symposium on the 26th and 27th of September 2024 under the theme Innovate, Integrate and Accelerate, a Universal Health Coverage Commitment. And this event will bring together experts to shape the future of healthcare and tackle critical challenges such as healthcare access and prevention. And you can be a part of this important dialogue by simply logging on to www.gems.gov.za to register and, of course, for more details.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
All right, we are catching up now with Jean Irva, and we are looking at breaking the silence and the barriers. September is International Month for Deaf People, and a time when inclusivity is not just a goal but a necessity. So it remains crucial for us to keep having these conversations, and of course to also acknowledge the vital role that sign language, especially South African sign language, plays in transforming the educational experience for deaf and hard of hearing students at tertiary level. Good afternoon to you, Joan. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Thanks, and thank you for having me.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think as much as we have conversations around, inclusivity, talking and pertaining to many communities in South Africa, right? We often miss the nuanceness of each community and the things that we take for granted as the able-bodied, in the most simplest of ways, get lost in the macro conversation. And maybe give us some understanding around just the importance and the significance of also having a very nuanced approach to our conversations.
Yes, I think if a person takes a look at sign language in particular, and it's important, to look at culture in this context, that sign language as an official language in its own right comes with its own cultural development for people who are born deaf, who grow up. That means schooling is done differently. The primary language of education should be sign language. And, this is something that has not really been available to many people in the past. And also, obviously, this has been a very, very big barrier for students to enter tertiary education because of the lack in primary education and what was made available to them.
And how do we begin to sort of, or where do we begin to be conscious of what needs to be done, even at that primary level, as you say, that speaks to access, before we can even address the issues at a tertiary level, for instance, at an institution such as yours at the University of Pretoria?
I think what the country has done recently is a very big stride in the right direction by having sign language recognized as the 12th official language. And I think this opens many opportunities. If I think about people at our university who are studying education, for example, they're able to learn of our official languages, with the aim of using that during instruction for children. And I think if sign language could be taught at university level, not only for people in education, but as an elective, for language, as an official language, this could really open a lot of doors and really promote inclusivity much more than it has been.
We had newly crowned Miss South Africa in studio with us the day after her crowning, Mia. And she spoke around, for instance, just looking at the visuals here, and she spoke around communication, even the taking for granted that everybody within the deaf community is also fluent in South African Sign Language. And she said, no, with some people lip read and they're fluent in lip reading, right? And we aren't conscientized even to that not every circumstance of communication speaks to the needs of the community in totality.
Absolutely. I think this is a misconception many people have around people with disabilities, that they just operate in a specific way or that they've had the disability from birth. And my experience is that most people, I think probably a very large percentage of people, actually get a disability later in life. So that does, that obviously then means that someone who loses their hearing at the age of 20 would not have had access to learn sign language. And with any other language, the older you get, the more difficult it becomes to learn the language.
Absolutely. How do you intervene at that sort of tertiary level? How do you get through the the language barriers for students? And what have you deployed at the University of Pretoria that has worked for you that can perhaps be modeled on other campuses?
I think it depends on the person's needs, first of all. There is a number of technologies that a person could make use of, depending on a person's background and obviously their preferences. For example, there is live captioning software available that people can make use of during the classroom. So everything that is being said is also displayed in text. The same is also available on most smartphones nowadays for phone calls as well. For people who do not have complete hearing loss, there are interventions such as FM systems or induction loop systems that can be installed in buildings or in lecture halls. And that enables the sound or the signal of the sound to be transmitted either directly to a person's hearing aid or to a headset that can be worn.
Yeah. I mean, technology seems to be a great advancement in innovation when it comes to connecting students from the deaf community. But I also wonder, does it at times not also overlook the needs of students that are perhaps technologically a little bit more challenged than other students, considering we don't all come from the same backgrounds and we don't all come from the same primary schools that were equipped in different ways?
Absolutely, and this is a challenge we have with all different types of disabilities. So we have to look at a lot of curricular training that goes into assisting these students, because we also want to prepare them for the workplace. So that means we do offer a lot of additional training apart from the enrolled curriculum or the qualification the student is there to get.
Jean, we appreciate the time with you. We fast run out of it. Our apologies for that. And Jean Yerver is the manager of the University of Pretoria Disability Unit. It is 2 o'clock on the dot. It's time for us to catch up with the news.
Bridget Masinga, weekdays on The Full Circle.
Just by way of reminder that Outsurance Essential Cover pays out claims in cash, allowing you to choose your own panel beater. You can simply SMS card to 43187 now.
Thank you, Bridget. Top stories. Nzimande makes a plea to the Tripartite Alliance and court dismisses Hlaudi Motsoeneng's appeal. Good afternoon. Former SACP General Secretary Dr. Bridget Masinga has called on the Tripartite Alliance of the ANC, SACP and COSATU to rally and face its current challenges. Speaking at the special official funeral of former Minister Pravin Gordhan, he said the fact that the ANC is now part of a government of national unity should not mean that they've surrendered their progressive ideals. Zimande says the alliance partners should honour Gordhan, who has been hailed as a struggle veteran and mobilized to continue the struggle.
Let's unite ourselves. Let's unite the alliance. Let's unite our people. Let's build a non-racial movement to take our struggles forward. In honor of Comrade Pravin, we have said as the SACP and COSATU, we're going to be convening a gathering of progressive forces.
The Constitutional Court has dismissed with costs former SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's appeal bid. This was over the 11.5 million rand success fee he received from the public broadcaster, which was declared unlawful and invalid. Motsoeneng sought to appeal the Supreme Court of Appeal's dismissal of his appeal. The initial decision by the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg had invalidated the payment and subsequently ordered Motsoeneng to repay the money. The Special Investigating Unit spokesperson Kaiser Kanyako says they welcome the order.
The High Court ruled that Motsoeneng must repay the 11.5 million plus interest, bringing the total liability to approximately 18 million. The Special Investigating Unit has already recovered 6.4 million from his pension benefit and sees this as a positive step in clearing the way to pursue the outstanding amount from Mr. Motsoeneng.
The Tshwane Metro Mayor, Celia Brink, has reaffirmed his commitment to the capital city. He held a media briefing today following the withdrawal of its key partner, Action SA, from the coalition. Action SA is now negotiating with the ANC to form an alternative government. Brink is also facing a motion of no confidence next Thursday, which, if passed, will dissolve his mayoral committee. Brink, who has been mayor for 18 months, claims under his leadership the capital city's public service delivery has improved.
The current leadership of Tshwane is committed to contributing to this project and building a capital city that works for all of its people. So whatever the political games that will play out in and around Tshwane, I want to give you my personal commitment. We will not abandon our responsibility for improving things in Tshwane.
The Tourism Business Council has called on patrons to visit establishments this tourism month and in the festive season in efforts to help boost the local economy. September marks Tourism Month in South Africa, driving expectations for an increase in tourism volumes and international arrivals going into the festive season. The Tourism Council is hosting the third Tourism Leadership Conference in the Northwest Province. The organization's CEO, Chibengwa, says the sector is key to creating jobs and economic growth.
We're starting to see that our recovery is at a faster pace, and we're hoping to get to full recovery by the end of this year in terms of the international arrivals. Domestic, we've seen a lot of South African traveling. They're enjoying their country. In fact, we have surpassed the number of trips that we did pre-COVID. So domestic, we're doing very well. But again, we need to make sure that our domestic strategy, is robust, and South Africans, do know about their country and do travel their country. So we need to continue and.
Finally, further afield, a Japanese learner who had been studying in China has died after being stabbed. His murder is likely to further strain bilateral relations between the two countries. Some observers have expressed concern that nationalist sentiment in China might be spilling into increasing violence against foreigners. The BBC's Stephen MacDonald has the details.
The 10-year-old was on his way to school in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen when he was stabbed. The alleged assailant, a 44-year-old, was arrested on the spot, according to Chinese officials. Though the student was rushed to hospital, he died in the early hours of this morning. The attack happened on the anniversary of a historic incident during the early stages of Japan's invasion of China prior to World War II. China's ambassador to Tokyo has been called in over what Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa described as a despicable act which was committed against a child going to school.
Recapping the top story, former SACP General Secretary Dr. Bledin Zimande has called for, on the tripartite alliance of the ANC, SACP and COSATU to rally and face its current challenges. He was speaking at the special official funeral of former Minister Pravin Gordhan underway in Durban. For SFM News, I'm Utsile Saku. Headlines at 2:30.
And that's that for the news this hour. Theft, accident and 1 million rand liability cover, all covered by Outsurance Essential. Get a quote today by simply SMSing car to 43187. So here's the good news for you and your older car. With Outsurance Essential, a 22-year-old woman pays only 384 rand a month for her 2012 white Kia Picanto 1.2X and gets paid cash so she can choose her own panel beater after an accident. Get the cover you need. Get Outsurance Essential for unfinanced cars that are older than 5 years and valued at less than 125,000. It's time to switch and save. SMS car to 43187. That's car to 43187 today. Remember that Outsurance is a licensed FSP and T's and C's do apply.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Okay. They actually did it. I mean, I've seen it done in other countries, but now they have a whole new local season of the show. Oh, Mzansi, you beautiful, amazing land with diverse families and cultures. Wife Swap South Africa is finally here. Tune in from Monday the 9th of September and see how families from across South Africa swap wives and learn a thing or two or three on how other families operate. There will be disruptions, lessons learned, tears, and smiles in this unique and insightful social experiment. Channel your best entertainment with Wife Swap, Mondays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
S3. Ask me how I know that 50% of car claims are pre-approved instantly. That's because I was one of them.
Yeah, they got my car back on the road with the first repair.
I submitted my claim on the ANG app. I didn't even have to call.
Auto & General is proud to be recognised as South Africa's best car insurer by Forbes and The Star for short-term insurance. Isn't it time you switch to award-winning cover? Visit autogen.co.za. Auto & General, never not there. ANG is a licensed non-life insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Grass will suffer when Golden Lions collide with Natal Sharks. They both target the gold medal. Gauteng tackles KZN. This is the Currie Cup final. Catch the incredible battle of Mzansi's great rugby teams, Golden Lions versus Natal Sharks, the Saturday 21 September at 3:30 p.m. live on SABC2. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Catch the Tastemaster Junior this Tuesday evening at 7 on SABC2. The top 6 contestants tackle a classic bake that's enjoyed all over the world, the humble pie. After learning the art of making pastry from scratch, they each prepare their own family-style pie filled with their favorite flavors. That's the Tastemaster Junior this Tuesday evening at 7, repeat Wednesdays at 1 and Sundays at 4 p.m. Only on SABC2.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
Matlonolo, lerato, kolofelo, letsepo, nnete le tumelo, ke tsela ya bophelo, re le tla le dikela, ke felelwa ke matla ke tshwerwe ke lenyora sentahle ngwaneshu le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima ntshware ka letsogo sentahle ngwaneshu tšhiwana e sena le gae sempheta ge o mpona garama swiswi ke sena le gae matlhonono lerato kholofelo le tshepo nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo ge le tlhao le dikela ke felelwa ke matla ke tshwerwe ke lenyora sentahle ngwaneshu le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima ke tshwerwe ke lenyora sentahle ngwaneshu tšhiwana e sena le gae sempheta ge o mpona garama swiswi ke sena le gae matlhonono lerato kholofelo le tshepo nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo ge le tlhao le dikela ke felelwa ke matla ke tshwerwe ke lenyora sentahle ngwaneshu le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima ntshware ka letsogo sentahle ngwaneshu le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima nnete le tumelo ke tsela ya bophelo le ge go le bjalo le ge go le boima ntshware ka letsogo sentahle ngwaneshu oh no ya no 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 oh no no ya oh no no ya no 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 nay 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 ya no 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 ya no 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 ya no 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 no
It is Judith Sapuma coming through with Twana. That is how we kick off the show today. They're shaking their heads behind the screen. I don't know why, but so sometimes they communicate with me in physical languaging, and I'm not quite sure what they're trying to say. We always share. I like sharing the behind the scenes of what happens on the show so that you can get some context as well. When we go off the cuff, and then you know why she's going off the cuff, it's because of the human beings that are behind, sort of steering the ship. It's 2:15 on The Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga on SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. And it's Tuesdays, and no, it's not Tuesday, it's Thursday. And on Thursday after 2, we like to indulge legal conversations or conversations that touch on legal matters, and today is no different. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination during a job application, whether yourself or a family member, a friend, a close somebody who's experienced discrimination when applying for a job? And then let's double that with also tagging on the other part of the question of, do you think that if you had a criminal record, if you had some kind of criminal history, do you think that that should automatically disqualify a person or disqualify you when applying for certain jobs or when applying for a job in general? So should your criminal record be used against you? 061-410-4107 is our WhatsApp line, and 086-000-2032 is the number that you can call us on. Love to hear your perspective on that. Have you ever experienced or felt like you've witnessed or experienced discrimination when applying for a job, whether it's yourself, firsthand, family member, a friend, or somebody in your inner circle? And then we're tagging onto that, we're just wondering, do you think that people who have criminal histories and criminal records should automatically be disqualified from, certain job positions? And you can obviously qualify your answer or your opinion by sharing. Maybe you think people in specific job categories and specific sectors should be disqualified if they do certain things or found guilty of certain things that speak to directly what they are applying to do. So we'd love to hear your opinion. Johan Bortes joins me now. He's the head of the employment practice for Baker McKenzie in Johannesburg, and he's going to help us understand the South African Labour Appeal Court's decision in the O'Connor versus LexisNexis case, and this all transpired in April of this year. Good afternoon to you, Johan. How are you doing?
Bridget, lovely, thanks. I was rather worried when you said it was Tuesday. I thought this week has felt longer to me than that. But apart from that, I'm doing well, thanks, man.
Listen, the mind is all frazzled. Thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. Let's jump in by firstly getting the background and the context, because I'm sure you're well versed on this O'Connor versus LexisNexis case and what the subsequent decision was in April.
With pleasure. I mean, and perhaps just to set the scene or to create the context for this, under South African employment law, at the risk of stating the obvious, employees are the beneficiaries of our employment law. So if you're an employee, you get all the protections in the Labour Relations Act, the Employment Equity Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. But the entry requirement is that you must be an employee. What the Employment Equity Act does for us, it extends that protection to applicants for employment as well. And that is the interesting matter that we found here in this O'Connor judgment. And essentially, you situated the case, the discussion so nicely in your introduction. Under which circumstances should a previous criminal record become a bar to employment? Under which circumstances should that be held against an applicant for employment? Because what the Employment Equity Act does, it extends the right against unfair discrimination to applicants for employment as well. So even though you're not an employee, even though you're only applying for a job, the Act allows applicants to also be the beneficiaries of this protection that we have in the Constitution, to say you may not unfairly discriminate, not only against employees, but in this case, also against applicants for employment. And that matter, Mr. O'Connor there had a past criminal record. The facts then turn out that, his criminal record was for counts of fraud and theft, but that was over 20 years ago. And when he applied for a role, the future employer said, but hang on, I'm employing you in a fairly senior role within our organization, and I am concerned about this criminal record you had about theft and fraud, and I don't feel comfortable in employing you. And he took umbrage at that, as he's entitled to do, because as we discussed, the Employment Equity Act extends protection to even applicants for employment. And he then lodged a claim saying, you are unfairly discriminating against me based on this criminal record that I have. And I'm dissatisfied with that. So that was a big information dump, Bridge. I'm not sure if there's anything out there right from the outset that you want to touch on, but Otherwise, I'm happy to take us through the essence of what the court considered as well.
Yes, no, absolutely. We'd also love to know the essence of what was taken into consideration. And of course, then the impact of the judgment by the court on future practices when it comes to the hiring process.
Perfect. Happy to do so. So what we have, if we just take that step back again to situate the protections against unfair discrimination, this we have in the Constitution, finds itself in the Employment Equity Act as well. And essentially, no employer may unfairly discriminate against another person, an employee, including applicants for employment, on any of the protected grounds: race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, family responsibility, HIV status, pregnancy, belief. So the Employment Equity Act has in Section 6 a really wide range of grounds that are protected by law to say that you cannot take any of these factors into consideration when you make employment decisions, including, in this case, the hiring of a new candidate. What the grounds for the grounds for protection also include is a ground called arbitrary grounds. So criminal record is not a protected ground, so it's not the same as sex, race, religion, ethnicity, language, and all the ones that we discussed. But because the Employment Equity Act also provides protection against arbitrary discrimination, a candidate like Mr. O'Connor did here can say that although criminal record in this case is not classified as a protected ground, I should get the same protection against it because it affronts my dignity. You are treating me differently on this arbitrary ground, my criminal record, and that is a serious affront to my dignity as a human being, that you treat me differently as a result of that. And this is the essence of what the court then considered. Say, did you treat this applicant for employment differently? And if so, was it fair for you to do so? The fairness argument comes in because the Employment Equity Act, in granting us and giving us this great protection in terms of Section 6, does make provision to say that in certain circumstances, you can fairly differentiate against candidates, even though the ground is protected. A classical example in that case may be the statutory protection that we get in respect of discrimination, differentiation on the basis of gender, race, and ethnicity, where the Employment Equity Act allows for differentiation in furtherance of our affirmative action aims in terms of the Employment Equity Act. Another statutory ground that an employer can rely on as a defense is to say that it is an inherent requirement of this role that you must possess the certain characteristic or that you may not possess a certain characteristic. So our law allows for us to say general protection, and you may not use any of these factors when you make decisions, but in certain circumstances, it could play a valid role, and then it does not constitute unfair discrimination. So the first hurdle the applicant, Mr. O'Connor, here had to get over was to convince the court that this criminal record ground that was relied on, as the same affront to my dignity as if it were race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or any of the protected grounds. And the court was quite comfortable to come to that conclusion, I think rightly so as well. So there was also no dispute that the employer did use that factor in order to make a decision.
Yeah.
The employer tried to rely, though, on the fact to say, but hang on, in the Act, there is provision made to say that an inherent requirement of the role could allow me to differentiate on one of the protected grounds, and that differentiation can then be fair. And that was then the essence of what the court considered. Is it fair to use a ground, an arbitrary ground like criminal record, to differentiate between candidates? And the high water mark of what the court gave us there is to say that not every criminal record, should disqualify a candidate from meaningful employment. And I mean, logically, we could agree it just makes sense and it resonates with us. But if we unpack it a bit further, I want to give the listeners just the comfort up front that there's no great monster lurking in the judgment. What the court did was just to confirm sensible decision making based on this. Employers should not feel absolutely distraught that they can now never take somebody's background information into consideration when they're making hiring decisions. The high watermark of what the court said to us is it must be germane to what you're doing. So in this instance here, although the employee or the applicant had a criminal conviction for theft and for fraud and admitted to that, the court said those elements are not going to be the subject of what he's going to be applying his mind to every day. You don't need this. You're not appointing him as your chief financial officer, the person who's going to hold the purse strings or the keys to the safe here. So yes, all of us as employees, our employer has to be able to trust us, and there must be, honesty and integrity is key in any role, no matter what it is that you do. But you cannot elevate honesty and integrity to such a role that in respect of any job and any decision that is made about employment, a past discretion, and in this case, 20 years past, can be a valid disqualifier to unseat a candidate, where an employer can fairly say, because you've got this blemish against your name and that blemish is a problem for me, I say it relates to the role, and therefore I don't have to employ you. That bit of relating to the role must be a salient link to what the employee is required to do.
Yeah.
What is your view? Does it make sense to you?
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. You know what I mean? Because I was actually going to sort of say to the question that I posed to the listeners, that, should one be discriminated against based on your past indiscretions? And if you've created or made a mistake 20 years ago when you were 21, 22, misguided as it might have been, and you've had 2 decades to turn your life around both personally and professionally, is it unfair then to keep holding that over your head? And also, if it doesn't relate to the job and the service that you are going to be providing, for instance, and there's no recent evidence that it puts that at risk, then perhaps there's room to then have a conversation around how do we progress around this. Because a lot of people, will say, yes, in my 20s I did make mistakes, but should I still be paying for them at 45?
And I think that's such a fair discussion to have. I mean, who of us have not made mistakes? Who amongst us, have this squeaky clean record where we don't, where we're just very grateful that 30 years ago there wasn't a thing such as social media, that existed. But there has to be some level of protection for employers as well. The court certainly not swung a direction of saying no matter what somebody did in the past, under no circumstances can you take that into consideration when making hiring decisions. The principle is still, when it comes to deciding who you let into the gate, at your workplace, who you employ, the courts are still different to the employers, because they appreciate, rightly so, I would say, that the judge is not in a better position to determine than you are, where it's your business, as to who you should employ or not. I mean, you must have a wide discretion to say, I like you and I think you're going to further my business interests and you're going to fit in well with the team and my customers are going to like you. I want to hire you, notwithstanding the fact that the person next to you has a better academic record, for instance.
Yeah.
But what the role the court should play, and what they did here, is to be, the bulwark and a guardian, against wrongful practices. So the court says, you decide who you want to hire. I'm not going to interfere, but you may not unfairly discriminate against somebody. And where you discriminate, there are very limited grounds that I would consider and allow you to discriminate when I come to the conclusion that you have indeed discriminated. So treat everybody fairly. You can decide who you want to hire, but don't take wrong factors into consideration making those hiring decisions.
Absolutely. I want to pause here, Johan, for the headline news, and then we'll come back on the other side. And I know I am chasing time today because of that Reserve Bank announcement that is coming through at around 3 o'clock. But when we come back on the other side, I also want to quickly explore sort of whether or not there should be some kind of criteria that employers then use to determine whether or not, criminal history is relevant, and what would those matrix look like and the parameters of that, while still obviously safeguarding and ensuring that business recruitment practices are still steadfast and adhered to. It is approaching 2:30. Otsile is standing by with the headline news.
Thank you, Bridget. Good afternoon. In the headlines, former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mcebisi Jonas, says the passing of his former colleague and friend, Pravin Gordhan, reminded him not only of the fragility of life, but also of institutions and political systems. Jonas was one of the speakers at the special official funeral for Gordhan in Durban. President Cyril Ramaphosa is currently delivering the eulogy. The Special Investigating Unit says it's currently probing more than 100 law firms that have defrauded the Road Accident Fund, and Mpumalanga Acting Police Commissioner Zef Mkonazi has relaunched the Highway Patrol Unit in Mbombela. The relaunch follows the escalating crime on the N4 toll road and other major routes in the province. Details at 3 o'clock.
The world's best cooking show is finally here. MasterChef South Africa Season 5. You'll meet 20 talented home cooks from around Mzansi, noma uphumapi, and no matter your favorite dish. See if the chefs can handle the heat in the kitchen in a race to be crowned MasterChef South Africa. Every Saturday, 7:30 p.m. only on S3 Channel 193. MasterChef South Africa, the world's best cooking show, proudly sponsored by Pick n Pay.
Kickstart your journey to success in 2025 with the Durban University of Technology. DUT offers programs in the faculties of Accounting and Informatics, Applied Sciences, Arts and Design, Engineering and the Built Environment, Health Sciences and Management Sciences, open for applications for 2025. Applications close on 30th September 2024, but dates may vary. Visit dut.ac.za for a full list of available programs and entry requirements. Apply now through the Central Applications Office by visiting cao.ac.za.
The Battle of Students will produce real drama, passion, and emotions in the Varsity Derby. UJ have a big assignment to emphasize why they deserve maximum points. But Ama Tugs are growing in confidence that victory can add a good boost to climb higher. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. UJ Ladies FC versus University of Pretoria Ladies FC on Saturday 21 September at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCsport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Healthcare is everyone's business. Join the conversation at the 2024 GEM Symposium on the 26th and 27th of September 2024, where experts, policymakers and innovators will gather to discuss the future of healthcare, with the theme being Innovate, Integrate and Accelerate a Universal Health Coverage Commitment. The symposium will dive into key issues such as health access, disease prevention and health promotion. Visit www.gems.gov.za to register and, of course, for more information. You don't want to miss the chance to be a part of this important dialogue.
This September, S3 brings you thought-provoking nature dockies that will change the way in which you view the world. Temperature Rising tells the story of 3 activists as they grapple with what thinking globally and acting locally means as they fight the barriers to climate action. Airs Sunday the 8th of September. Channel your inner activist with our selection of premium dockies Sundays at 5 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
And we went on a water safari, and Mom spotted a hippo, and it said, "Grrr."
There is a place where you can see wonder and the wild, with breathtaking scenery and endless landscapes. Enjoy good food and embrace great taste.
And the next day we went to the reed dance. I saw the maidens handing over reeds to the mighty Zulu king, and the Zulu warriors chanting, "Baye!"
Explore all this and more in the magical Zulu Kingdom.
This message is brought to you by KZN Tourism and Film Authority.
By Banyana Ba Style believe the only way to maintain their lifestyle in the summit is to grab an important win. However, JVW ladies have calculated the power of 3 vital points and refuse to settle for less. This is the Hollywood Men's Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game, Mamelodi Sundowns Ladies FC versus JVW Ladies FC on Saturday 21 September at 11 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
It is the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga. Let's go to WhatsApp quickly.
Good afternoon, Bridget. It's interesting listening to that attorney or whoever he is roll out that case. I'm just wondering, are there any grounds that you can actually decline to employ or to accept someone's application for your job? Because it doesn't seem like an employer has any protection whatsoever. I mean, when someone leaves another company and his next employer where he applies asks for a reference, can his previous employer give a bad reference and then he decides not to employ that person because of the bad reference? Or is the previous employer restricted from doing that as well now in terms of labour law? Mark from Cape Town.
Johan, I'm going to throw it to you.
With pleasure, and I'm actually glad Mark asked the question. This judgment, not by any stretch, changes the legal landscape in respect of what employers are entitled to do. The judgment is not new in the sense that it teaches us something completely different to what we want. It's more of an extension confirming the same sort of principles that we hold dearly. An employer has absolute large scope and latitude to decide who it hires. What the judgment confirms is that under no circumstances, save for 2 statutory exceptions, affirmative action and inherent requirements of the role, may you rely on grounds that would constitute unfair discrimination. So you cannot make decisions based on race, religion, marital status, family responsibility, HIV status, and try and justify that on the basis, but hey, as the employer, I can hire whoever I want. You can hire whoever you want, but your decision-making should be in line with what we are trying to achieve as a society and what we say, what we hold dear. So yes, you have freedom of hiring, freedom of appointment, freedom of promotion within your workplace. But when you make those decisions, the courts can and should act as a sense check to say, when you made that decision, did you not hire that person because you did not like the fact that that they come from a different ethnicity than you, or you made the decision based on the fact that you now found out that this candidate is HIV positive. So it does not limit you any more than or in any other way other than just to say, as a society, we say we don't unfairly discriminate against people on various grounds. And in the workplace, it's no different. You should not unfairly discriminate, but you can absolutely say, I think person X is going to be a much better candidate because how they came across in the interview. I heard some feedback via the grapevine from a previous employer that they had terrible issues with this person, and therefore I'm not going to hire them. It doesn't need to be empirical facts that you base your decision making on.
Yeah.
What the judgment more confirms is that there are things that you should not take into consideration when making those decisions. And that is always a good thing from sound HR practice perspective to bear in mind.
Absolutely. Johan, they're staring at me and I would have loved to continue this conversation, but because of that repo rate announcement, we have to wrap a few minutes early today. We appreciate the time with you and, of course, for unpacking this judgment for us. That was Johan Bottas, head of the employment practice for Baker McKenzie in Johannesburg. Nalibali is coming through.
friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Nali Bali. Children who are read to learn new words, concepts, and ideas, which help them improve their vocabulary, comprehension, and critical thinking skills. Specifically, reading aloud to children can help develop their listening skills and attention spans. A well-developed vocabulary is linked to better school performance. When reading out loud or listening to others do it, your mind concentrates both on the sound words and their meanings, and this is a hefty cognitive workout that strengthens comprehension. Today's story is called Dry My Tears, written by Mpumelelo Matwa. But before we listen to today's story, let's all get up and dance! Chief Sigodongo of Zala Zala was a good chief. He ruled with fairness. His people were happy and served him loyally. But the chief was not happy because he suffered from sleeplessness. Night after night he would toss and turn in his bed until dawn. He tried every herbal leaf and root, but none of them helped him sleep. Chief Sigodongo was desperate for a good night's sleep. One morning he summoned the villagers to his courtyard.
My people, as you know, I have not been sleeping well. I am very tired. I need someone who can tell me a great bedtime story, like the stories you tell your children to help them fall asleep. Anyone who can tell me a story that helps me sleep will receive 100 kettle, which will be delivered to their kraal.
He said. Soon a long line of villagers filled the chief's courtyard. Chief Sigodongo listened to every kind of story told by hundreds of hopeful villagers, but no one could tell him a story that made him sleep.
I said I wanted a story that'll make me sleep. I don't want a horror story. I want to sleep.
Cried the chief as one young man told him a horror story.
This story is funny. I don't want to laugh at funny stories. I want to sleep.
The chief scolded a young woman who told him a funny story.
Now you have told me a sad story. Now you've made my sadness even worse.
The chief cried as another villager told him a sad story. Then one morning, an old man entered the chief's courtyard. The villagers called the old man Sinyabi because he spoke and moved very slowly. He was also very poor. Everyone looked down on him, and it made the old man feel very sad and very lonely.
If only I can tell the chief a story that makes him sleep. Hey, I will receive 100 kettle. Imagine. And finally, just maybe, the whole of Zala Zala will finally respect me like they should be.
Sinyabi said to himself as he slowly approached the chief's hut. But when the villagers saw him, they whispered to each other. Sinyabi didn't listen to them and slowly knocked on the chief's door.
What can I do for you, Carla?
Asked the chief kindly, calling him by his real name, which means to cry.
Oh, Nkosi yam, I have heard of your request, Chief Sigodongo, and I have come to offer you my services, my chief.
Kala replied.
Very well, Carla. I am all ears,
said the chief. So Kala and the chief sat down on the polished cow dung floor. Slowly and softly, Kala began telling his story. His story was like a song, and many words were repeated over and over again.
Many years ago, There was a chief who owned a huge wheat field. So then one night, after filling his shed with sacks of wheat, a horde of rats raced to the shed. They ran and jumped to get to the lovely food. A few hours later, the rats left the shed in slow motion, dragged their overfull stomachs, slowly, slowly, slowly. They crawled out of the door.
Kala looked at Chief Godongo, but he was still awake. So Kala continued his story.
The next night, as the rats scurried into the small shed, they noticed that the chief had put out traps near the door to catch them. To avoid being caught, the rats made another hole in the shed where they could get in safely, one by one, and leave safely, one by one, one by one, one by one. Each rat collected one grain of wheat and carried the grain of wheat out through the hole that they had made. They carried the wheat grain, one grain at a time, one grain at a time, one grain at a time.
Again, Kala looked at Chief Godongo. The chief was still awake, but he was starting to look tired. So Kala slowly continued his story.
Every night, the rats followed the new path they had made. They carried the wheat out of the shed, one grain at a time, one grain at a time. In and out they went, in and out, in and out, each carrying one grain of wheat, only one grain of wheat.
He's asleep. Whispered Chief Sugonondo's bodyguard. Our chief will weep no more, he said. When Kala looked up, he saw the bodyguard was right. Chief Sugodongo was fast asleep.
Ah, I see that my story helped a very sad and tired chief fall asleep. This is exactly what the chief had wished for.
Kala replied as a tear rolled down his cheek. Then Kala left the chief's hut. He returned to the villagers and said,
Remember this. No matter how poor and lonely I was, I have helped the chief fall asleep and get the rest that he needs. No matter what everyone says, I have a gift for being kind and gentle. My slow and gentle story has helped the chief fall fast asleep.
The villagers were very happy that their chief would no longer be sad. They felt bad for being rude to Kala. They apologized and thanked Kala for helping the chief. The next morning, the chief woke up happy after a good night's sleep. And soon, Kala was smiling happily too as the chief delivered 100 cattle to him as promised. From that day, there were no more tears. Kala had managed to dry the chief's tears and his own. And so we come to the end of another Nali Bali story time. Today's story was called Dry My Tears, written by Mpumelelo Matwa. Did you know that reading and telling stories to children at home can help them do better at school? If you want free stories to read to your children or for your children to enjoy on their own, visit Nali Bali website www.nalibali.org or Mobi site www.nalibali.mobi. You will find stories in 11 South African languages, as well as tips for reading and sharing stories with your children to grow their potential. Also look out for the bilingual Nali Bali Reading for Enjoyment supplements with great children's stories and activities available in newspapers. Nali Bali, it starts with a story.
Dawn breaks across the lush Serengeti plain. But paradise is fleeting as the animals face fresh challenges. Kali the lioness and Bakari the baboon may seem safe in their rock fortresses, but with rivals encroaching on all sides, their future hangs in the balance. Out on the plains, Duma the cheetah faces his destiny. And down by the river, baby hippo Mafuta strikes up an unlikely friendship with the crocodile Magamba. Channel your inner explorer with Serengeti, Season 3, Sundays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up. S3.
Ziwa non-stop in the Betway Premiership. Abafana West End have a huge task to secure 3 points, while Batabani Bantwa are ready to fight with all they have to grab an important win. This is Ikolana Simzansi. Catch the nail-biting contest between Golden Arrows and Marumo Gallants this Saturday, 21 September at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Bridget Masinga, weekdays on The Full Circle.
As we proceed to chase time in our final few moments, we're catching up with Emily Gammon, associate at Weber Winsell. And Emily's going to help us understand SARS' recent increases to customs duties for online retail orders and the things that we need to know around this. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm well, thanks, Bridget. It's great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for the time. Let's jump straight into it. Walk us through the recent increases in customs duties and, of course, subsequently VAT as well on online purchases. What do we need to know about what has changed?
Thanks, Bridget. So the previous position was that if you ordered something online for under 500 Rand, you would pay a flat import duty rate of 20%, but you would not pay VAT. If you ordered values of items of a higher value, you'd then pay a sliding scale of 20% up to perhaps around 45%, as well as the 15% VAT. As of 1st of September, SARS has implemented changes so that flat rate of 20% on 500 Rand and below will still be implemented, but you will now also pay 15% VAT. What's also important for consumers to know is that 15% VAT is calculated on your total price, including your import duty. So that pushes it up a little more as well. On higher value goods, there's no amendment at the moment. So it just applies to that below 500 Rand exception, which is known as the de minimis exception.
Yeah. And did this come as a direct result of the complaints that were lodged by a very big retailer in South Africa?
So SARS has explicitly stated that the move is to protect local industry, and they haven't specifically cited any specific retailer or any complaints made, but perhaps we can infer that. It's also important to remember that this is part of a bigger plan in terms of the South African trading industry. The Department of Trade and Industry has had a master plan in place since 2019 to increase employment in the industry. And part of that master plan did include the increase of tariffs. So it may also have something to do with that.
And I wonder, Emily, I remember, the buzz around popular shopping platforms like Shein and Temu, which obviously have become very, very popular in recent years. And the buzz that this created around the increase for those who use those platforms. But for some of us, we always understood it from that sort of 45% scale. And maybe it's a reflection of where we were shopping, because it's always just been part and parcel of, our online practices. You add that extra 45%. But what does this then, or how does this then affect the importing of online products in South Africa? I presume it's obviously good for local manufacturers, but what does it do for those who buy a lot of their stuff online?
Yeah, so as you've identified, it impacts people who are purchasing lower value goods more than it impacts people who are purchasing either expensive items or bigger orders, because it hits at that 500 Rand and below threshold. So it does have an impact on consumers in the sense that if you're looking to buy quite cheap items of clothing or cheaper goods, it will have an effect on you. And I think that's something which is really challenging to deal with in the South African market, because obviously we're all looking to pay lower prices, and it can be quite tricky to find those lower prices in the local market from local manufacturers. The idea, of course, is that as we bring manufacturing closer to home, we enhance our local industries and we support local industries so that they're eventually able to offer lower prices to our local consumers. I think that, for me, is the hope out of something like this.
Yeah. Some of the conversation I saw on Twitter as well were people saying, well, do we not have trade agreements with some of these countries? Are we not in partnership with them by way of BRICS? And so should they not be advantaged to such, when it pertains to import duties?
Yeah, so it's a good point. There are trade agreements in place. I am, in fact, not a trade expert at Weber Wenzel, so I'd encourage people also to reach out to our trade and investment team if they're interested in this. But as it stands, as we don't have any trade relationships which protect us against these tariffs with, for example, China. The BRICS example, I actually can't comment on and how that impacts on things like specifically lower value goods. So it would actually be interesting to know.
I mean, it would be of interest, and I wonder if anyone listening can actually tell us a little bit more on this. They're telling me that I have to wrap, but as a final point, as you've alluded, these tariff increases do have a very direct impact on the local manufacturing industry, especially if we're looking at the retail and textile industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, what I think is really important about this is that these international retailers, specifically from Asia, are fairly well known for having poor labor practices, poor environmental practices, issues in the supply chain such as forced labor. And these are things which, although we may not always be able to validate the allegations around, are things which should definitely spark concern consumers. What is an excellent opportunity for the South African manufacturing industry, as well as the manufacturing industry around Africa, is to look at taking this opportunity to boost our own production towards more environmentally and socially friendly practices, so that we can become a hub for production that actually has sustainable practices. I think that's the type of opportunity that we should see in these kinds of trade tariff protectionism, and which we're seeing actually all around the world. So that's the opportunity, I think, for Africa here.
Absolutely. Emily Gammon, we appreciate the time, and Emily is an associate at Weber Wenzel. That is how we say goodbye today, and standing by for Governor Lesetja Kganyago to come through and hopefully give us all a little bit of relief. The anticipation is that he's going to be dropping that repo rate by at least 0.25 basis points, but we wait to see what the actual final decision is. From myself and my team, inshallah, God willing, we do it again.
In our top stories, Ramaphosa pays tribute to Gordon and SIU to probe law firms linked to road accident fund fraud. Good afternoon. President Cyril Ramaphosa has delivered the eulogy at former Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan's special official funeral at the Inkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Centre in Durban. Meanwhile, former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mcebisi Jonas, says the passing of Gordon reminded him not only of the fragility of life, but also of institutions and political systems. He was one of the speakers at the funeral. Jonas says small mistakes can lead to the collapse of governments and political parties.
We take for granted in South Africa that we have a strong judiciary. We take for granted sometimes that we have a strong revenue service and all the institutions that one can think of. But we also know that all these institutions could disappear in a wink if we don't take the right decisions, both as citizens, as leadership in this country.
The Special Investigating Unit says it's currently investigating more than 100 law firms that have defrauded the Road Accident Fund. The SIU briefed the Standing Committee on Public Accounts about the scale of wrongdoings by law practitioners when representing claimants for road accidents, among other issues. SIU lead investigator Leonard Leketo says an estimated 3 billion rand in losses are being investigated at the RAF against private lawyers, including the sheriff of the court.
And SIU is investigating 102 law firms, which includes the sheriff who received a duplicate amount of 340 million. The RAF and SIU has managed to recover some of the funds, and today the SIU has signed EOD to the value of 70.9 million, with actual cash recovery to date amounting to 41.5 million.
The Constitutional Court has dismissed with costs former SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's appeal bid. This was over the 11.5 million rand success fee he received from the public broadcaster, which was declared unlawful and invalid. Motsoeneng sought to appeal the Supreme Court of Appeal's dismissal of his appeal. The initial decision by the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg had invalidated the payment and subsequently ordered Motsoeneng to repay the money. The Special Investigating Unit spokesperson Kaiser Kganyako says they welcome the order.
The High Court ruled that Motsoeneng must repay the 11.5 million plus interest, bringing the total liability to approximately 18 million. The Special Investigating Unit has already recovered 6.4 million from his pension benefit and sees this as a positive step in clearing the way to pursue the outstanding amount from Mr. Motsoeneng.
Recapping the top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa has delivered the eulogy at former Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan's special official funeral at the Nkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Centre in Durban. More news at 3:30.
The National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
1 minute past 3. Let's go straight to the South African Reserve Bank, where the Reserve Bank governor is going to announce if there's a change to the repo rate or not. Let's go live.
Have become more favorable, but there are still risks. A soft landing is looking more likely after the worst inflation surge in a generation, but it is not inevitable. The financial market volatility of early August was a reminder of the fragilities and uncertainties in the system. For these reasons, central banks are approaching the end game with caution. Turning to South Africa, output was marginally below our expectations for the first half of the year. We expect improvements in the second half, with growth of 0.6% in both quarters. This reflects rising confidence, in part due to a stable electricity supply. We expect extra spending given withdrawals from the new two-pot retirement system, although some of these funds will be absorbed by debt repayment and tax. For the medium term, our growth projections have once again edged higher. The upgraded forecast is premised on better functioning network industries, especially electricity, alongside broader reform momentum. Because potential growth is higher in the forecast, supply and demand